Hi, and welcome to Coping During the COVID Crisis. I'm Janet Gross. As we all deal with the changing world, new rules to follow, and some restored freedoms, we all have questions and not always a lot of answers. For families and teachers, what will the next school year look like? When will it start? High school grads and college and university students wondering how far back might this put them in getting on with a degree or a career. At this point, there are so many unknowns, and that can be seriously frustrating and a little nerve-wracking. Dr. Roy Salgado, professor of counseling at the University of Holy Cross, is here to help us talk through ways to manage that stress and expectations. You know, I've heard it a lot of times that parents now think that teachers should get $1 million a year. It is such a crazy job.
Yes, and it's important that people realize that it's a lot of work to have 20, 25, 30 kids in a class. And now parents are realizing what it looks like to have maybe 2, 3, or 4.
Right. Or even one sometimes.
Right.
You know, it's difficult.
Right.
It's a hard job. So, but I mean, as we look at that, there are a lot of unknowns and a lot of issues that go with this. How do you deal with those unknowns?
Yeah, now that we're approaching the end of the academic year, you know, here we are with only a couple of weeks left before the school year is over, and pretty much a third of the academic year has been done through online learning. You know, and that's different, something that parents were not expecting. When this school year started, they had no idea that the better part of the spring semester would be at home online learning.
And kind of up to them in many instances.
Right, you know, and the parents are having to be responsible for the day in and day out aspect of getting tasks and assignments done and completed and turned in a timely fashion so that the kids can meet the standards for the curriculum of the grade that they're in. And it's a lot to ask of parents. You know, parents are responsible for their kids' education. Sure. You know, they are their first teachers after all. Okay. But there's these logistical components that just no one was anticipating, and now trying to figure out how the end of the year is going to wrap up and what the start of the new academic year in the fall is going to look like.
If it even is in the fall. I mean, I've heard talk about maybe we should start a little bit early, maybe we should start a little bit late, maybe we should do it this way. I mean, there's no definitive answer at this point.
And I would imagine that different school systems are going to have to come up with different solutions depending on their particular needs.
Mm-hmm. And I know we were talking about just in these last days or whatever of teaching at home during the regular school year, you are still managing to try to get your work done, their work done.
Yeah, the logistics of it all. You know, parents are talking about how they're having a tough time trying to get their kids to do work, their academic work, between 8 and 3 during the daytime, while they're trying to do their work from home as well. Mm-hmm. You know, even those who have the privilege to still be employed and be able to work from home are having a tough time trying to manage it all. They might have limited devices, and so they're all having to share the same computers or technology. And so it becomes tricky. And when parents, you know, kind of step away to do their own work to pay the bills, then the kids perhaps get a little lax and aren't supervised right for that 30 minutes and like, what are you doing? You need to be doing your schoolwork. Right,
and are they going to be ready at the end of all this? Have you done your job? Have your kids done their job? And I'm sure teachers think about that, and maybe students don't think about that because they're thinking, I'm good.
Right, you know, yeah, I would say that the majority or a good portion of the students really don't think about it one way or another. There's a handful that do that, they're really on point. But teachers really do have that credentialing and that training to know what the curriculum is and what the standards are, the benchmarks that need to be met. Parents don't necessarily know that. Mm-hmm. And so parents don't necessarily know if milestones or benchmarks are being met in a curriculum of the curriculum of their children. And so it's important to stay connected and in constant communication with the teachers, with the school counselor, so that as a team they can try to ensure that the student will meet as many of the standards as are possible, even in a situation such as this.
I would assume that parents have to also take the responsibility in the beginning of next school year, no matter when that starts, to make sure that their kids are keeping up, because you fall behind and that can last a long time. You might not get the next thing, and then that block is missing and you're falling down.
Especially in the primary school years, you know, if you're missing something fundamental, let's say you didn't get a chance to properly learn your multiplication tables, that could set the stage for 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade, well into high school and adult life. You know, there's certain things that need to be acquired at certain critical points in a child's academic career. And if certain things are missed to no fault of their own, we need to figure out a way to be able to remediate that and have students be able to catch up so that they don't fall behind in the long term.
And that can lead to low self-esteem and so many other issues than just not doing their work well. You know?
Right.
I mean, you can really fall behind there if you think, oh, I can't do it.
Yeah. You know, and if parents find that they're struggling with this, of not knowing how to navigate, how to be their teacher while at home, you know, they can contact our counselors in training at the University of Holy Cross, who are being trained to work in school systems as well. We have many individuals who are in the school counseling track, and they can help parents be able to navigate their children's academic progress and success, to be able to have open lines of communications with their schools, with their teachers, with their counselors, and be able to figure out best plans and best practices to make their kids' online educational experience optimal.
And let's talk about this for a minute, because you brought it up. The service that the University of Holy Cross is offering can help people in a lot of different situations.
Yes.
And these are counselors in training, but with all of the necessary courses and
Yes.
I think one of your colleagues put it, they're like, you know, residents or interns in a hospital, in, you know.
Yes, very true. You know, they have all the requisite training in order to be able to provide this service. And they're at the end of their training, and so they're doing their practicum or their internship. And they have all the skill sets necessary to be able to help individuals be able to deal with their presenting problem and find solutions to their issues. So if a parent or a student is finding that they're struggling, trying to figure out how to wrap up this school year, you know, we only have a couple of weeks left. And they're realizing, you know, my student, my child is struggling, and we don't know how we're going to get through this year, and we need to figure out how we can successfully get him through for next year. Perhaps talking to a counselor in training from the University of Holy Cross can offer some insight as to how to be able to communicate with their school officials to be able to find plans, you know, individual educational plans for their student.
And this, we're going to put the number up for this. It's 504-398-2168 that you can call to arrange an appointment, telemental appointment. So it's, you know, no contact at this point.
Right.
But it's free.
It's free of charge. All they would have to do.
Is there an age limit? Could it, like a 16-year-old call? Or?
Well, you would have to be 18 years old to be able to enter into a contract, if you will, to be able to set up an appointment. But if you are a minor, you could have your legal guardian or sponsor call to set up an appointment and begin that process. Okay, so it does span a couple of generations. I mean, it's not like... Yes, we provide services to very young children as well, you know, so we provide play therapy to very young children. And so something that we're learning to do through telemental health, the dynamic is a little different. Yeah, I've seen in the office the play therapy setup, which is great, but I guess over the Zoom, it presents its challenges, but you'd be surprised what can be accomplished. Okay, well, we're going to talk more about students and the school year and parents as we all work through this. We'll be right back.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
And welcome back to Coping During the COVID Crisis. Dr. Thomas Fonseca, the Associate Professor of Counseling at the University of Holy Cross, is now joining us via the magic of technology to talk about students and classes and parents and their jobs for both parents and students as we continue going through this period in the pandemic, dealing with different things. One of the things I wanted to ask you first, thank you for joining us, Dr. Fonseca. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
You know, Dr. Salgado and I have been talking about just the different stressors that are on parents and about making sure that their kids are being educated correctly and keeping up so that they're ready to go to school next year, whatever school looks like. And I guess that's something that counseling can help with if you're like worried about, am I messing up my kid's life because I'm not a teacher?
No, that is a very real concern, and there are a number of concerns. I think it'd be a good point for a good time for parents to take a deep breath and remember that they can establish a new routine with their child as they try to homeschool and bring the schoolwork home to continue to work on. I think it's also important that to remember that a number of students and parents' routines have been disturbed, have been really mixed up, and so we have new routines. And to try to get creative with that really takes a great deal of effort, but we're ready to work with them.
So as we go into summertime, and a lot of schools have programs in place to keep kids active, their minds active, in a regular summer. I guess this summer, I don't know, I'm assuming that that's going to happen too, and maybe parents need to be aware of that and keep engaged in what their particular school is doing and offering.
Right. It's important for parents to understand what the expectations are for their respective school. Every school has different expectations, and they're going to operate according to their specific student population needs. So for the parents to stay informed and up to date, because the schools are just right now, as this school year is coming to an end, trying to make plans for the summer as well as for the fall.
And you don't want to let your kids, like, really, it's been a couple of months and maybe they haven't been doing all of their assignments. You don't want to let that continue, because then you're going to have, a 5-month break of doing work, and I guess that's not good for anybody.
Right.
I mean, I would assume, Dr. Fonseca, that there's the counselors are trained in really how to help parents and even maybe some college students deal with, keeping up so that they're not left behind.
Oh, most certainly. The school counseling students especially are trained to work with students as they're trying to adjust through all this and be able to adapt to whatever the fall will bring. We think we know what the future holds, but right now everything is so uncertain. So we just get rooted in the here and now. And that seems to be working with a lot of students and parents.
Is it a problem? I know that although a lot of kids may not like to go to school, it is an anchor for them. It is a place that is full of routine and expectations that are met. So I guess that's kind of maybe a problem for some kids.
It is, and I'm thinking that a number of students will actually be somewhat glad to go back to school and to reestablish their routine and have that anchor back and to socialize and be with their friends again and be with their support system.
No.
And with some other students, unfortunately, if they come from families that are not exactly the most loving or the most stable, the school day is a safe refuge, a safe escape from a hostile home environment. And so these are some of the things that we need to be thinking about as well, that there's some students out there that they don't have that respite. They don't have the break from their abusive home situation. And the school teacher or the school counselor or their friends were that escape for them. And that this has been an especially trying time for those students.
Wow, I guess so, because they may not have the support or even a loving friend or a teacher who cares for them. Even meals. Right. I know that they have been trying to keep that up, but school really offers so much more than just times tables.
It certainly does.
Yeah.
It certainly does,
So what if we have a school system or a school year where sports are curtailed or clubs or meetings, things like that? I mean, for many students, this is their identity.
No, that's a very good point. For many students, sports and clubs and extracurricular activities have become part of their identity. A part of what should be considered is virtual clubs and getting together and building that social system. Just because we're not here in person, they can still rely on one another to provide support. But that is something that would be great to discuss with the school counselor or another counselor, clinical counselor, to address, like how not having sports and not having no extracurricular activities in person might be affecting these kids, and parents who need to send their kids to some of these clubs and get them involved in sports.
You know how parents are involved in sporting activity or their kids, whatever they're doing.
Right.
Many parents are all gung-ho for that.
School offers so much more than just reading, writing, and arithmetic, right? It offers, sports, social time. When you think back to your high school experience or your elementary school experience, you don't necessarily think about the math problems that you did or the class. You think about the dances. You think about the football games. You think about, times on the weekends with your friends. These are things that are part of the school experience and things that perhaps need to be thought of as to how they're going to be approached differently in the upcoming months and in the upcoming academic year.
Because there have already been so many missing moments. Right. Graduation, prom, all those things that they won't have because they're gone. I mean, they have it in a different way. You see signs in people's yards and everything. Right. But is that going to be a factor too, the people who look back, Dr. Fonseca, and say, I didn't get that. I'm sad. I really prepared for my graduation. I really wanted the prom. I was looking forward to the date or whatever.
I think that varies from student to student. I'd want to add that some of my students, my graduate student interns, are mentioning that their students that they're counseling are talking about maybe having their own prom once this is all over, pitching in and being a chaperone of sorts for next year's prom. So they're looking forward. They're thinking forward, and I like that. Others are somewhat regrettable that they missed their prom, but it looks like they'll be able to catch that up.
You gotta love kids,
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's do this then.
They're a lot more resilient than we give them credit for.
They really are. But you also have to watch because you want to make sure that none of this is hurting them and you're not seeing it, I guess.
You need to be mindful of that because depending on their emotional state and where they are developmentally, this can have adverse impacts, but to the extent that we can mitigate that by creating new situations for them that they can look forward to, we ought to work towards that effort.
And yay, kids who do that. That's excellent. Dr. Fonseca, thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate your input here and talking about this with us.
Thank you for having me.
Sure. And we'll be right back after this.
Why should young people care about the spread of coronavirus? Well, we know that people with underlying medical conditions over the age of 60 are at highest risk, but they've got to get it from somebody.
So we're asking everyone to be selfless for others so that we can protect those who are most susceptible.
Not going to bars, not going to restaurants. It all just means physical separation so that you have a space between you and others.
For more information on how you can social distance, please go to coronavirus.gov.
And welcome back. We are being joined by Dr. Pat Thomas, Assistant Professor of Counseling at the University of Holy Cross. Thanks for joining us, Doctor.
You're welcome.
We were talking a little bit off camera just about the expectations that people have for their kids, for the future, but we really have to put those on hold, I guess, a little bit.
That's my opinion. Is like, we're experiencing something, and the school situation is very different from others because there's so much structure and expectations among parents and students as to what should happen, and it's just not happening. And I've been doing a lot of thinking lately, and I hope it's appropriate to share this quote because I think it sets a basis. It says, "She stood in the storm, and when the wind didn't blow her away, she adjusted her sails." And I think that's where we are right now. We're still in the storm. Most of us have not been blown away, although we've suffered some losses. But the end point is very important. She adjusted her sails. If people don't adjust their expectations, they're going to be beating themselves up, trying to make the same thing work under different circumstances. So I like that quote, and I hope parents and students and teachers can think about that a minute. The importance after a storm or during it, if we're not blown away, we have to adjust.
And I guess this is for everybody. I mean, we're talking about parochial schools, public schools, charter, even homeschool. You really have to just, like you said, take it and go from there.
and it's very different. Every family is different. Our school counselors and the students at Holy Cross that are trained in school counseling know that counselors don't fix problems. We can't make the situation be different from what it is. So, we have to help every family figure out what works best for them. I think expecting to be able to somehow at home make up for what they're not getting in school is just not realistic, and there's so many ways that parents, they have things accessible to them through television or through the internet to supplement, that all education does not take place in the classroom. We say that, but this is really a time, I think, to put that into practice and look at all the other ways we learn.
And that's great advice to parents and to the whole family, really. So is that something that the counselors in training can help you with, can help people through and maybe give them direction and kind of a reality check on how they can be a part of this?
I think so. I think that's one of the things that as counselors, when we've been trained, what we learn to do is you have to meet with each client or family individually. So you'd have to find out what sort of resources they have, and maybe acquaint them with some community resources where they can, get access. There's so many websites that are doing free not Zooming, but free streaming from museums and parks and all sorts of things that are out there for free, which are not normally free. And I know equipment and stuff is a problem for some families, but most families have a television. And I think many of them at least have one computer. And many of these resources, the whole family can watch together and, expand their education outside of a school setting.
And I guess, whatever you're learning, if you're learning, that's going to help your brain and you're kind of stay in the mood between this and the next school year, whatever that looks like. Dr. Thomas, you were talking about some of these things, and I've watched, the Northern Lights and the polar bear. There's live cameras all over the place. You just sit there and you can watch things. The surf in Hawaii.
Right.
It's amazing.
Right. To Dr. Thomas's point, the University of Life teaches us so much. Our experiences teach us so much. And so we have to adjust and be flexible and not think that it's going to necessarily happen in the same lecture format. The Socratic method is a very good method to learn, but not the only way to learn. And so I think Dr. Thomas brings up a very good point that the experiential component is going to be playing a larger part than perhaps we had thought during this time.
And so really I guess, Dr. Thomas, to sum it up, do parents have to worry about this, or can they just kind of use what they know and the resources that are available to really help their child get from here to there?
Well, I think that, we can't control what people worry about, but I think as counselors, we want to assure them we don't need anything else to beat ourselves up about. And I think parents are struggling at home, with children that they're trying to homeschool, and many of them are trying the best they can, but, I don't think it's realistic to expect that much of them. We need to comfort them and just tell them to do what they can.
Okay, great advice. Thank you, Dr. Pat Thomas. We appreciate you joining us.
You're very welcome.
Okay. Dr. Salgado, I guess, just like you said, the school of life, and we are being taught so much during this.
We certainly we are. We're all learning so many different things all at once, and students are no different. They're having to learn in new ways, and parents, as Dr. Thomas said, figuring it out little by little and not beating themselves up about it. I think that's a pretty wise thing for her to have shared.
And I love the quote. That was excellent.
Right.
So, okay, let's get to some of your tips for managing, coping during this crisis.
Well, the school year is not over yet. There's still a couple of weeks left, and during that time, just to understand what the expectations are with regard to distance learning. Every school is different, and so it's going to be important for parents to understand what their specific school's expectations are for their student. And to determine what activities work best, all students learn differently. Not every student learns the same way. So parents know their children more than anyone else. So to be able to figure out what works best for their child, for each child. To encourage the child to move too, to be seated in front of a computer or in the same spot for hours on end is not going to be beneficial for anyone's learning or anyone's mental well-being.
Right,
So
we've
it's really
heard that
important.
even before this. You know,
Absolutely.
just don't sit down and do nothing.
So just get up and stretch and move about and do things of that nature. And to reduce distractions, perhaps the environment that the child is being asked or the student is being asked to do their work is full of distractions. So if there are those things that are perhaps not allowing the child to focus, to remove that to the best of your ability. This is a big one that parents have been talking about, is adjusting their schedule, having to work at the same time that they're having to monitor their children's academic progress and completing assignments and worksheets and things of that nature. Perhaps having to readjust it where you're not necessarily working at the exact same time that your child is having to do some work, that you can kind of figure that out and negotiate that. Use a checklist to focus on what's needed.
I love lists.
Yes, lists are good. They're very helpful. Take frequent breaks. It's important to get up and take a break, and to provide immediate feedback with what is going on. If the child is doing something that's working for the child, offer that positive feedback, saying, "Good job, you're doing that well." And if they're doing something that perhaps is not most effective, bring it to their attention in the immediate moment, saying, "Let's try something differently because this doesn't seem to be working."
Because that's, if you let things go on and on, it's just going to get worse.
Right.
And as in most things.
Right.
Okay. Dr. Roy, thanks so much. This has been really interesting, this topic about students and being teachers as parents, or even as grandparents. I know a lot of people are subbing in for that too.
And something with which we all can identify, because we've all been students or we know students, and so we know what that experience is like, and so trying to figure out how to make it work for those that are currently students in this situation.
All right. Dr. Roy Salgado, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you at home for watching. We hope to help as we all work our way through coping during the COVID crisis.